Hello again, Steve here with a little bit of a coffee chat on the devil. The devil is lurking. My dad used to say the devil goes around like a roaring lion seeking who he will devour. And there's most traditions actually have this concept of devil. And what I'm going to say here, this is just, conjecture, of course, because a lot of these old stories, I think the real value in them is the parable that they're telling us. They're teaching us the story that of this nature to fall into decadence and so on, into lack of self care fundamentally from the get go, and then of course that translates into care for others as well, and downright evil and wickedness and so on, as the terms would be said, right? And I think that there's a lot of people on the internet, I especially notice now, and this has been going on forever. There's always people who are delving deeper into the spiritual side, trying to understand life from a theological point of view. And there's those who try to understand it from a scientific point of view. And sometimes people like to put like pull a wedgie between the two as if they're somehow separate. And I think what happens a lot of times is there's a lot of people who get to a very great degree of rationality, making a rational argument for the spiritual context of these stories. As an example, I think his name is. Um, there's this guy on the internet. You'll find lots of his lectures. He's a very, very traditionalist Catholic Bishop Richard Williamson. He does a great expose explanation of rationality and how a this was typical of the Catholic Church to preserve this rationality. He talks about Thomas Aquinas and all these kind of people who really carried on the tradition of Aristotle and Socrates and these guys from way back in the day to make sure that that part of us was alive. And I think that's very valuable because a lot of times the mystics and some of the so-called Protestant sects and whatever different sects, they want to ignore the rationality and go straight into this subjective concepts of God and what have you. And though it's kind of funny because a lot of times these are very intelligent people. I mean, I would say that the IQ of this Richard Williamson is probably very, very high. But the funny thing of it is that what I notice is that even though a lot of people get a lot of things right, I'm not saying that I'm getting everything right whatsoever. I'm including myself in that basket, so I would hope that people would point out my errors as well. Though they speak of the importance of logic and never dispensing with it, they go into illogical dogma. And as soon as we have dogma, that's negating it, right? And of course, there is a logical thread that goes to the dogma. But at a certain point, there has to be the suspension of belief within the dogma. Otherwise, it's no longer dogma. For example, Williamson says that when we look at something, as opposed to the subjectivist, who looks at something and says, yes, I can see the leaves on the tree, I can see the bark and so on, but I have no idea if it's just a complete void behind there. I have no idea. Whereas the logical person would say, no, we've studied this lots of times, we put them under microscopes, we've felt them, we have all the other previous memories of actually experiencing the tree, climbing the tree and so on, that we're not going to say just because we look at green of leaves and brown of trunk that at this moment we have no idea what's behind it. That is craziness, that is madness, in terms of logic anyways. But he also says that the creator of that tree is also a logical abstraction. And it is, in a way. So he goes like, and that's why the creator is above. He says, you look across to the tree, and then your mind, when you think about it, has to go up, or it has to export somewhere to something grander than yourself and grander than the tree. Because we can't logically conclude that the tree made itself. We can't logically conclude that we made the tree. So something or some power has created the tree. That's a logical abstraction, I would say. However, then it's all defined what that is. It's this Jesus Christ and Trinity and all this sort of stuff, and a guy who was born of a Jewish sect and said he was God, therefore he's God. That's where the logic breaks down. Your eminence, Bishop. That's where it breaks down. And I know you would counter me on that and call me a heretic and so on, probably. But I'm going to stick with that because I have to stay with logic. And the reason I want to stay with logic is because it's part of me. If I am even to believe in a God, now that's aside from the point now. Yes, of course, I believe. No, it's not that I don't even believe it. And he makes that point too. He says, he knocks on the wall. And he says, I don't have to believe that there's a wall there because my experience is such that there's a wall. I don't have to believe that there's a table here, there's a camera in front of me. There is because it's there. I can experience it, right? Well, I don't have to believe that there is God if what I mean by God is that which created what is. I don't have to believe that because in my experiencing, I see what is as best I can. And then I have to conclude, he's right. You project out, then you have to project out or somewhere. You have to project beyond the creation, right? Because there's the realization that there is more to it. So this is getting a little bit off the chart and everything, but it is coming back to the nature of us to get points right, but then fall back into our dogma for whatever reason. Right? I believe it's a tribal thing, really, but we fall back into it. And so he makes all kinds of, veiled, but overt accusations of other groups of people who have, adulterated the truth of the Catholic Church, including Ratzinger and Pope John Paul II and the current Pope and the Jews and everybody else. They're all sort of these heretics which we must defend against. Well, that's another whole story, but it does come back to the nature that we have as human beings to scapegoat whatever it is that we don't like, right? And I would say that's what the devil is. The devil is the most extreme case of that. But it makes sense in a way. I mean, the devil is a caricature, in my opinion. It's a caricature of the nature that we see in man. And so is God. Right? I mean, that's how we experience. And after all, I think the Christian concept of the second person of God, the Son, is a very apt example of personification of God. So we say that this guy who was a man, and man, of course, is code for mankind, of course, is also God. Right? So that's to me, that's an admission that God is within man. Like God is personified in man and mankind. And so is evil, right? So God being goodness and creation and everything. But there's also this nature to not understand, to not have fidelity to reason, in other words. And you look at this going way back into the Greeks, they talk about logos, right? They talk about logos. And logos, the Bible, the people who translated the Bible, they said it meant the word, right? But long enough back, it means it's the root of logical. It's reason. It's where it's cause and effect and what have you. That's what logos is. And when we divert from that, when we ignore reality, our highest concept, our humanity is our reason, in other words. Otherwise, we're animals. Like we have, intestines, reproductive systems. We eat, we crap, we do all that stuff. So do the animals, right? But when's the last time you had a philosophical discussion with your dog? It's not going to happen, right? It's not going to happen. Not going to happen with anybody except another human being, another member of mankind, right? Man or woman. That's where it's going to take place. So that's our highest earthly attribute, you could say. And when we ignore that, when we say, oh, no, I don't know anything. I'm a complete idiot. I see the green leaves, but I have no idea what's behind that. And furthermore, I can just make up and fantasize what it is. No, because you have experience. You can go in, you can have curiosity, you can begin to examine it, and you can find out things about it. And once you find out things about it, that when you squish the leaf, green liquid comes out of it and stuff, you can't just go making stuff up. That is abandoning of the logos. And I think that's where evil comes in. right? We can see that there's no end to evil and there's no explanation for it, because evil, or what we say, the character of the devil in theological terms, the character of the devil is the negation of what is possibly known, right? Is the negation of truth, right? If we know something about the tree and we ignore it, we're in a way, it's not extremely evil, you could say. It's not like murdering somebody or something, but it's the beginning of it. It's the ignoring of truth. And that's what I would say is the origins of this devil. And the thing is that the human body, of course, one of the reasons that the devil is often personified as this great tempter and so on, and this to boil up our lusts and all that sort of thing, is because we have, as our body, we have all of these urges, which animals have too, dogs and cats and whatever have them, in order to push them on to preserve their life, right? We have hunger and appetites so that we eat. So that would drive us in the past when there was scarcity and so on to look, find food, whatever we could, right? We have drives for sex because we had to have a lot of it way back in the day because most kids died or were eaten by something or whatever. And we had to procreate as often as we could, just like cats. They just do it as often as they can and so on because so many of them die in the wild and what have you. But bring man into the modern day when there's plenty. All of a sudden, we actually have to be able to override. We have to be able to use our reason and say, look, yes, I understand why there's these appetites. But if I just eat a hot dog every hour because my taste buds like it, well, logic tells us that's gonna cause a problem. And in theological terms, we call that a sin of gluttony or whatever, right? And the same goes for all kinds of sex and everything. Nothing wrong with it. Nothing wrong with any appetite whatsoever. In fact, it is absolutely glorious and there for a purpose, right? There for a purpose. I'm not talking about a purpose in terms of the grand scheme of things or whatever, although procreation is there because if we don't procreate, we end by dying out as a species. But it's there just like hunger is to preserve us individually. Well, our sex drives are there to preserve us as a species. Right? And the same thing with when we have gluttonous behaviors, we end up with side effects. If we have gluttonous sex drives, we end up with side effects as to all kinds of diseases and, unwanted pregnancies and what have you, right? All kinds of stuff. Busted up relationships, which cause social calamity, and all kinds of stuff busting up of the family, which we see what's happening now. Kids who are dysfunctional and on and on and on. So, to me, that's sort of my take on sort of a lay version, if you will, of sort of a broad scale look at things as to what this devil character is. It's like we, children, when we want to teach them about stuff, we tell them stories about Santa Claus and Peter Pan and all these sort of characters, because we're not going to get into a philosophical discussion with them. Well, many people are like that as well. A lot of people, they don't really like to get into heavy-duty philosophical discussions, but if there's a story, and we personify the nature of us within a story in terms of a character. Okay, so we got this Jesus guy, great example of how to behave and so on, if we believe that. Then that's something to live up to. And then there's this character who's really, really naughty, this devil character who we don't really want to associate with. And, we want to stay away from that kind of behavior. Well, it sets up a system of the stories helping us to self-govern. And that's how I see it, and the closer we can get to that, it'd be great, probably be great if we could all just reason these things through, but a lot of people don't want to or whatever. So the next question is, what's the best of the bunch? Is it Islam? Is it Judaism? Do the Buddhists have it right? Do the Baha'is have it right? Do certain sects of Christianity have it right? Do the Taoists have it right? Or the Shintos or the tea ceremony people? Who knows? I haven't looked at them all. I'm not going to make a critique of them right here. Christianity has lasted quite a while, certainly. But at the same time, there's I think they've preserved reasoning, which is very, very high up there. So the more reasoning we can have, I think, the better off we'll be, because the closer we get to logos and the closer we get to the highest nature of ourselves, I would say, which is the ability to reason. Steve here again. Great chatting. If you like what I'm doing, please like, subscribe, and share. And we'll talk again soon. Bye for now.